Hello and welcome to the Kitbash, everyone. Here I'm going to examine various model kits and see how they stack up against the more recent kits in that line, and how accurate they are compared to the original unit if they have an anime or other sort of media. Not exactly complicated, but it should get the job done. In order to create a comparison for anything, of course, we have to understand what the latest and greatest is. For the purposes of Gunpla, we will be using the re-release of the original RX-78-2, the Gundam, of course, the HGUC model number 191. So here's a little information on Gundam plastic kits, colloquially known as Gunpla. They're pretty much ubiquitous, and I could say without a second thought that they're the best miniature kit on the market for posability, pricing, and sheer depth of line. Though not easily available in the States if you're looking for specific units from older shows, they are on the market and probably won't break the bank too bad to get them. They come with stickers, extra hands, and weapons, and most notably clear plastic beam weapons. The secret to their success? Polycaps, which are softer plastic bits that go in the joints, allowing better posability in play. The Gundam itself is a mean machine for the Earth Federal Forces, able to take down Zeon Zakus in a single shot, while throwing the invading military into disarray. It could carry a beam rifle, which is a powerful energy weapon, a shield, and a bazooka, as well as carrying 2 beam sabers. It had thick Luna-titanium armor that could shrug off most conventional weapons, and was piloted by a 16-year-old kid who turned out to be just shy of psychic. It carried some more esoteric weapons like a beam javelin and a giant ball and chain, but those were not often brought to the field against the enemy, and they do not show up in the model kit that I am looking at today. Eventually, the pilot, Amuro Ray, became so proficient that he ended up needing to upgrade the War Machine, which only made his kill count skyrocket. So let's kick it over to the live cam and take a look at our yardstick. If you're going to talk about Gunpla, the first thing you should do is definitely check out the most recent edition of the Gundam itself. After all, it is the one that has the most to show. As you can see, its range of posability is in several places. Has a double jointed elbow that allows it to go all the way up here for that old... Where the hell is Lassie anyway? Look. It's also articulated at the shoulders here. As you can see, the poly cap goes all the way up. Bends at the elbow. Bends at the shoulder all the way up, so it can give that hefty shrug. Little play at the waist here, not a ton, but enough, without sacrificing the look of the model. And it might be just me, but the shoulder joint, I am having some difficulty getting a lot of play with on the on both sides, really, but mostly on the gun arm, which is annoying but not a huge problem. Now down to the legs, double joint here. A lot of articulation here due to that special polycap version they've got going on. As you can see, the range of posability on the RX-78-2 is quite impressive. You get a pretty decent Superman pose out here. Thanks to the way that the neck is articulated, it can kind of go up and down, back and forth, a lot more than one would usually expect from a plastic model kit. Unfortunately, we do have this problem, at least for me, that when trying to do complicated poses with the right arm, polycap seems to want to not stick in there very well. There might be a building error. These things happen. It can, in fact, reach all the way back and pick up one of its beam sabers, as you can see here. Obviously, the fingers are not articulated, so you can't stop motion your way into actually grabbing one. But they do pop out. Everything pops out, really. The beam sabers themselves do not have a separate component, as one might think. Rather, the saber itself pops out, and we get these cool beam sabers. Now, you'll notice that the beam saber is slightly taller than the model. This is not entirely unappreciated because it gives you the ability to do a lot more interesting, intricate poses with them. As is often the case with Gunpla kits, there is a lot of problems sometimes with getting the parts to stick in, obviously because they're manufactured to be put together and not blown apart. All the poses seen here are legitimately doable, near as I've been able to figure. To try and attempt to get that just as close as I can without any fancy camera work, though models sometimes don't agree, but as you can see, it's not too far off, and it doesn't take a ton of work to get to that point. Now, I'm not a professional builder by any imagination, I am a hobbyist, but, yeah. I think it gets the point across pretty well. Now, if you want a better version of this, there is always the hobby base here, as properly described on the screen here. Fits snugly into the, well, crotch plating, for lack of a better term. And while it will not give you quite the dynamism as holding your own pose, it does have a number of very interesting things that it can do, such as give you a tilt. So as you can see, it will hold a pose for you in any sorts of strange angles you may like to do. That being the case, it does on the box say that it can do a very specific pose from a very specific episode. And so we're going to test that out here. There's a very classic behind the back shot that is in Mobile Suit Gundam episode 33, I believe, when they're escaping Side 6, where Amuro basically no-scopes a dude, just turns right around. Shot on screen doesn't quite turn out the way they expected it to. The Gundam turns itself mostly around, pivots, and pops a dude with his beam rifle right behind him. As you can see, this is the pose we're trying to achieve, with limited success. And this is the version from the show. So the thing to remember about shows from the 70s, especially robot shows, is that they didn't really give all that much of a squirt about things like physics and the way a robot would actually be able to move. They just wanted to make a really cool pose. And to an extent they succeeded, however trying to replicate this is damn near impossible. However, I think this is pretty good, given that I don't have all of the resources of the, Bandai labs and institutes and various and sundry places where people make Gunpla professionally. But I made a concerted attempt here. That being the case, let's try and put him back into some of my more beloved poses. Now, I am a weirdo who thinks that if you have a shield, you should have it out pretty much at all times. And that you should be turned. Oops, we're getting in a little trouble there. That if you have such a thing, you should be turned with it, pointing at you, deflecting any incoming fire much as you can. I'm also a big fan of the one knee up sort of posing for mecha in general. because it makes them look fluid and dynamic and like they're flying through space. Some of you may disagree, and that's fine. I'll just sit here being right, and you can be over there. There are certain other mobile suits that I've got with me here, just for comparison's sake. Here's the Gundam Mark II, also the re-release line. Very good. I think, though, for the purposes of this exercise, that the original Gundam here is more something that we should be ascribing to as the top of the line, whereas this is the redesigned Mark II, which is great, which is a good mobile suit and all that stuff. However, it's more, it's walkier, it's clunkier, it's not as sleek as its cousin here. By design, of course, but I think we will get the best mobility out of the RX-78-2. Now, interesting thing to note, the beam saber has this nice bulge at the end, which feels more like a proper weapon. This is probably something that only I appreciate, but especially for things like the Titan's Quell, this is their beam saber. This is the Gundam's beam saber. The Gundam's beam saber is about half again as long, and does not feature, and the Quells does not feature that cool bulge quite so much. In earlier kits, which we'll be touching on as the series goes on, a lot of these kits simply had, well, just a straight stick of clear plastic. If they had one at all, which was not a given. Go home, cousin. Two things about the Hyper Bazooka also included. As you can see here, it can be posed. The posability is built into the gun, not into the model, for whatever you may need out of it, and that also just kind of lowers its profile a bit. It has this nice clamp with a little clicky thing on it that you can stick into the back, and it fits right here. So one of the main reasons that I don't put the bazookas into the back of the mobile suits for the most part is that it makes them look overloaded, but the other thing is, I don't particularly like the bazookas in the grand scheme of canon. I prefer them to have beam rifles. Also worth noting, take that, thank you. Beam rifle itself has its own fist with a trigger. Some of the mobile suits that I have do not have trigger fingers, which is kind of frustrating, but ultimately just a personal point of preference. As you can see, beam rifle, pretty much show accurate. It's easy to make a gun that looks like a fucking toy, right? The scope, sight, whatever the hell this thing is, gun camera, as near as I've been able to figure, pivots just nicely, and it stays in place. It doesn't, you know, move to, or go all soft on me and flop to the sides. The handle also, foregrip, I guess is the gun name, right? It goes like this, goes like this, and goes like this. Now, as it swings side to side, there is a point where it feels like, oh hey, this is where it's supposed to rest. And then this, and then you kind of have to push it all the way there. It's not a hard push, but again, I have giant Hun hands, so. Beam rifle does good, boss. Now, for some reason, I've always enjoyed the rifle up pose, just because it looks like it's ready for action and all that happy crap, but other people may disagree. So, got the bazooka here, this funny little handle, I guess. This seems like it would be really, really, really not fun to try and fly around with. Like, oh hey, look at all that drag I've got. Must be because of a giant fucking rocket launcher in my butt. The shield is like 3 pieces, solid as a rock. Clips into the arms, which you'll note have pegs on both sides. Also has a handle, if you're one of those lunatics who thinks that mobile suits don't need to have both hands free to fight. So there you have it. I would say that this is pretty much the baseline for what I would consider a good Gunpla kit in the year of our Lord in 2017. You'll notice it has good stickers, simple stickers as well. There's not a lot of show. There's not a lot of funny details across the chest like in the Master Grade stuff. Beam rifle is very simple. This model is show accurate as best as they can. And that is not a knock against the design, that is a knock against the animation, because the animation studio tended to say, what's a ruler, when it came to the first Gundam. There are a lot of rounded edges on things like the Zaku, especially the older style, which I have here for comparison. A lot of round shapes on this boy. When do I get my turn? When do I get my turn? It looks sleek, but it also has significant mass. Its weapons are all correct, and they do all the things that the gun should be doing. You can Johnny up some of the poses here pretty accurately to the show, which I think was their intent, and I think they succeeded fairly well. Next time, I hope to look at some of the ones that didn't succeed quite so well. In the cases where show accuracy overwhelms, say, good common sense. But that is an issue for next time, and we'll see you then. So that's our gold standard for now of how an ideal Gundam kit should work and what it should come with. I personally really love how this version of the Gundam looks. The colors look like they should. The kit looks imposing without getting over-designed, and fits the look of how the OG Gundam should without sacrificing mobility. Now, you may notice that I haven't panel lined any of these units quite yet, because I want you to appreciate how good the bare plastic looks when assembled. The model should be able to stand on its own after all. This is what 5 stars looks like. Now, you may disagree, and that's fine, but that's how I'll be measuring the rest of the model kits in the line to this point. I hope you enjoyed this little excursion, and let's see how well this does. If this does well, I will continue to do more, though I will admit that I am a hobbyist, not an expert. But maybe that'll be just fine for those of you who are looking to get into Gunpla or any other plastic model kits that I may decide to use down the line. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.